everybody, we're here again. It's time to do some Tao. Poem 38. So poem 38 is a longer poem, at least long for the Tao Te Ching. It can kind of be broken up into two parts, and it's really on the last part that I want to focus. But before we get into the poem, let me say a couple things about the significance of where this poem arrives in the book. Now, as you guys well know, there's really no structure to the Tao Te Ching. We have poems that cover all kinds of topics in a variety of ways. There's no one standard categorization like these 5 poems are about the ego, and these 7 poems are about heaven and earth, and these next 8 poems are about mother. It's just a book of 81 poems in various order. But from what I've read in a couple of different translations is that the first 37 poems, so poems 1 through 37, are Tao, or the way, or the path. And poems 38 through 81 are virtue, te, virtue, or integrity. So in a way, the book, even though it is not noted in any sort of way in the arrangement of the book, is in 2 halves. We have Tao and we have Te. Now, in my experience of reading poems 38 through 81, I do notice a shift in some of the topics and what it's talking about. However, I still see a lot of themes that come from what we're calling the first half of the book, which is not technically half, because you guys can do math. The first part of the book, how about that? But like I said, there are plenty of themes that I see in the second part of the book that are evident in the first part of the book. So it's not, like a lot of things with the Tao Te Ching, it's not like a clear-cut division between first part and second part of the book, between Tao and Te. But that's kind of Taoism anyway. So like I said, I want to treat this poem really in 2 parts, and I want to focus more on the second part. But we'll go ahead and go over the first part. Therefore, when the Tao is lost, there is goodness. Another translation says, therefore, when the Tao is lost, we resort to goodness. An interesting word. When we resort to something, of course, it means that we are doing it because there are not a lot of other choices. So, therefore, when the Tao is lost, we resort to goodness. But our translation says, there is goodness. Second line, when goodness is lost, there is kindness. When kindness is lost, there is justice. When justice is lost, there is ritual. And in another translation, ritual is replaced with the word dogma. Now, ritual is the husk of faith and loyalty, the beginning of confusion. Knowledge of the future is only a flowering trapping of the Tao. It is the beginning of folly. Therefore, truly great people dwell on what is real and not what is on the surface, on the fruit and not the flower. Therefore, accept the one and reject the other. So, like I said, there's a lot to unpack in this particular section of the poem, so let's get to it. You'll see that there is a progression, if you will, in these first 4 lines of this second to the last stanza, where it says, therefore, when the Tao is lost, there is goodness. When goodness is lost, there is kindness. Okay, so like I said earlier in the video, each one of these are in a way a type of good, but do not reach the goodness, if you will, the pure goodness, if you will, of the Tao. So while they are a step removed from the Tao, it's like the best we can do. So look at it this way. The Tao and being like the Tao is, of course, the best thing you can do. But, as we know from reading some of these other poems, the Tao is also very mysterious and wrapped in mysteries, so it's very hard for us humans to sort of get to that level of the Tao. So, for those of us who can't, and I would suggest there's very few of us that can, when the Tao is lost, well, there is goodness, right? Or we resort to goodness. Now, goodness is a virtue in and of itself, right? To be good is just simply good. The only way you can be better than good is to be like the Tao. So this is one step below the Tao, goodness. But now let's say, for whatever reason, goodness cannot be achieved. And so it says, when goodness is lost, there is kindness. Now kindness, of course, is a great thing. Like, why wouldn't we want to be kind to others? But kindness, in and of itself, is a type of goodness. So if you will, it couches in goodness, or falls under the umbrella, if you will, of goodness. So it's one step below goodness. Kindness is a type of goodness. So now we're 2 levels removed from the Tao. And then next we have justice. Now when we think about justice and times when justice is necessary, you probably think of our court systems, you probably think of someone being wronged, and when someone is wronged, there must be a type of justice, right? A consequence for that wrongness, if you will. Now you might say that true kindness might be that we simply forgive that person who has wronged us and we move on. But when kindness is not available, or rather when kindness is lost, we must resort to justice. Because justice, even though it is not as good as kindness, nor is it as good as goodness, or as good as the Tao, justice is a type of thing, a type of mechanism, if you will, that keeps the peace. And keeping the peace is also an important good. But even if justice is lost, we then resort to ritual or dogma. Now, if you think about ritual and what ritual is, or what rituals are, it's a thing that you as a person go through that is sort of mindless. You go through the motions, right? Those motions accomplish something, but nonetheless you're going through the motions. You might think, although this isn't like a terribly sacred type thing, I think we often associate ritual with sacredness. But if you think about, like, say, your morning ritual, back when we, went to school, you might have had a particular morning ritual. Your morning ritual might have been just to roll out of bed, throw on some clothes and go. Or your morning ritual might have been very regimented, like you get up, you take a shower, you put clothes on, you put your makeup on, you go and you make a bowl of cereal, and then you pack your lunch for the day, and then you put all that in your backpack, and then you go. And you do that every single morning the same way because it's a ritual, right? You don't put a lot of thought into that ritual. It's just what you do, and it achieves what needs to be done, yes, so therefore it's important, and a good, but far, far removed from goodness or kindness or any of those kind of things. And then the next line, which I really like, says, now ritual is the husk of faith and loyalty, the beginning of confusion. Another translation says, now ritual is the most superficial form of faith and loyalty, right? The beginning of, and in another translation, instead of the beginning of confusion, it says the beginning of stupidity. So ritual is the husk of faith. Boy, I think that's some really strong language there, because if you think of the husk of a thing, it's very superficial. It is the outside. In fact, with a lot of insects that we probably associate husks with, they shed their husks. I mean, they're that worthless. Other than it just protects the inside. And in other poems we've seen examples of outside and inside, and how the inside is more important than the outside. The outside is just simply a container, if you will. So ritual is the husk of faith and the beginning of confusion. Knowledge of the future is only a flowery trapping of Tao. It is the beginning of folly. Knowledge of the future. Can we have knowledge of the future? No, we really can't. And that's why knowledge of the future, if you will, is called a flowery trapping. We have the imagery of a flower in the next stanza as well. And you think of flowers, and flowers are very pretty, and they smell nice, and there's sort of a frivolity in a way, although certainly they add aesthetic beauty and value to our experience. in this stanza it says, knowledge of the future is a flowery trapping. So I think the message right there is to live in the now. I could be wrong on that, but that's my take on it. So we get to this final stanza, and it says, therefore truly great people. I would like to suggest that truly great people is again a nod to the sage or the wise, right? So therefore the wise or the sage, truly great people, dwell on what is real and not what is on the surface. Dwell on what is real and not what is on the surface. On the fruit and not the flower. If you think about like where fruit comes from, like an apple or cherries, man, the last couple of weeks we've seen some beautiful photos online of cherry trees and their blooms. And they're absolutely beautiful and stunning. But as far as sustenance goes, I mean, I guess we could eat cherry blossoms. But as far as sustenance goes, it is the fruit that comes after the flower that's important. It is what sustains us. And so the final line there, accept the one and reject the other. So this is our introduction to virtue, the virtue aspect of this part of the book. It talks about some virtues very specifically and how, while each one of those virtues are important, they are a step away from the best thing that you can be. And that, of course, is to be like the Tao. But if you can't be like the Tao, embody goodness. If you can't embody goodness, then at least be kind. If you can't be kind, at least be just. And if you can't be just, at least follow some sort of ritual that will, even if it is kind of mindless, lead you down the right path, towards the right virtue. Alright guys, that's it for now. I hope you guys have a great week, and thanks for tuning in. I'll see you again soon.